The air in a Seoul subway car has a unique smell. It's a blend of kimchi from 100 hurried breakfasts, the sharp metallic tang of the rails, and the faint, clean scent of disinfectant. For Nia, it mostly smelled like survival. Each screech of the wheels on the track was a tick of the clock, another moment spent not earning the money that hummed like a high-voltage wire in the back of her mind. $80,000. The number was a physical weight, a stone in her gut. The cost for the first round of experimental immunotherapy for her grandmother's pancreatic cancer, a diagnosis delivered 3 weeks ago that had fractured her world. So, she rode the subway from her tiny rooftop room in Haebangchon to the polished, soulless corridors of the Gangnam high-rise where she worked as a care aide for a wealthy, withered woman who had forgotten her own name but not how to complain. The work was draining. The pay was barely enough to cover rent and Nana's basic medications. The $80,000 was a mountain she had to climb with a teaspoon. Her gaze drifted across the car, a practiced, non-committal sweep that took in everything and engaged with nothing. A gaggle of schoolgirls in their neat uniforms, whispering behind their hands. An old man asleep, his head lolled against the window. And then a sound that cut through the low rumble of the train. The sharp, inconsolable wail of a small child. The cry was piercing, a pure, uncut expression of misery that made shoulders tense and faces tighten across the car. Nia's eyes found the source. A little boy, no more than 3, was strapped into a stroller, his face red and slick with tears, his tiny body rigid with distress. And beside him, the father. He wasn't just a man. He was an island of absolute stillness in the agitated sea of the subway car. He was tall, with a frame that filled out the severe lines of a dark, impeccably tailored suit. The fabric whispered of money, of a world far removed from the scuffed linoleum floor. A watch on his wrist, a Patek Philippe, caught the fluorescent light, a single object that could have paid for Nana's treatment twice over and left enough for a down payment on a life she couldn't even dream of. His hair was black, cut with razor precision, but it was his eyes that held the room. They were cold, dark, and utterly devoid of emotion as he stared down at his screaming son. His power, so palpable in his posture and his presence, rendered completely useless. He was a king with a rebellion in his own bloodline. Other passengers shot him looks of annoyance, some of pity, but no one dared approach. A silent perimeter of intimidation surrounded him and the crying child. Nia knew that cry. It wasn't a cry of hunger or pain. It was the sound of a world that was too loud, too bright, too much. It was the sound of a deep, anchoring comfort being absent. Her hands, resting on her worn leather satchel, twitched. She knew what to do. It was her trade, her gift. Soothing the distressed, whether an elder at the end of life or a child at the beginning of it. But this was different. This was Seoul. She was a foreigner, a black woman, an outsider. Drawing attention was a risk. People already stared, their curiosity a constant low-grade hum in her daily life. To deliberately insert herself into this man's frozen crisis felt like stepping off a ledge. Survival screamed at her to look away, to put in her earbuds and pretend the sound wasn't fraying her own nerves. The boy's cries hitched, escalating into shuddering gasps for air. He was working himself into a state. The father's jaw tightened, a single muscle flexing in that granite face. He looked lost, not angry, not annoyed, lost. And in that flicker of paternal helplessness, Nia saw a crack in the fortress. Her grandmother's face flashed in her mind. Nana humming in her garden, her hands covered in soil, the smell of baking cornbread, the strength in a woman who had raised her after her own mother had passed. That strength was fading, consumed by a disease with a price tag. $80,000. Risk was relative. Nia took a quiet breath. She didn't move closer. She didn't speak. She simply began to hum. It was a low, gentle sound, a melody from a half-forgotten place. A Korean folk song her mother, a Busan native, used to sing to her when she was small. Seomjip Agi, Island Baby. A lullaby about a mother waiting for her fisherman husband, rocking her child by the sea. The effect was not immediate, but it was perceptible. The boy's screaming faltered. He hiccuped, his wide, tear-filled eyes swiveling in her direction. The man, who had been staring intently at his son, slowly lifted his head. His gaze met hers. There was no warmth in it, only a sharp, analytical curiosity. He was assessing her. A threat, a nuisance, an anomaly. Nia held his gaze for a barest second before looking at the child, her expression softening. She let the hum build into words, her voice quiet, barely a whisper, but clear and steady. She sang in Korean, the gentle rolling melody filling the small space between them. The lyrics were simple, about the moon in the sky and the waves in the sea. The boy, Jae-won, was mesmerized. His crying stopped completely. He watched her, his little chest still hitching with the aftershocks of his tantrum. A tiny hand reached out from the stroller, fingers grasping at the air in her direction. The train slowed, its brakes hissing. "Sinnyeon," the automated voice announced. The man's stop. He stood, his movements economical and precise. He adjusted the stroller, his eyes never leaving Nia. The other passengers seemed to exhale collectively as the source of the noise was silenced. The doors slid open. For a moment, Nia thought he would just leave. It was the most likely outcome. A strange woman sang to his child. The crisis was averted, the moment was over. But he didn't move. He stood in the open doorway, blocking the exit. He reached into the inner pocket of his suit jacket and produced a slim, severe card case. He extracted a single card. It was thick, heavy linen stock, completely blank except for a string of numbers embossed in black. He held it out to her. Nia hesitated. Her heart hammered against her ribs. Taking the card felt like a commitment to something unknown and dangerous. Refusing it felt like disrespecting a man who radiated consequence. "Take it." His voice was a low baritone, devoid of accent in English, yet carrying an undeniable weight of command. Her fingers, trembling slightly, closed around the card. It was cool to the touch. "Call," he said. It wasn't a request. Then he turned and guided the stroller onto the platform, disappearing into the river of people without a backward glance. The doors slid shut, and the train lurched forward, leaving Nia staring at the blank card in her hand. The silence he left behind was louder than his son's cries had been. The number sat on her phone screen for 2 days, a silent dare. Nia researched it, but it was unlisted, untraceable. A ghost. On the 3rd day after a particularly grueling shift where her patient had thrown a bowl of lukewarm juk at her, and a call from the hospital finance office had left her hands shaking, she pressed the call button. A voice answered on the first ring, speaking brisk Korean. "Yes? Hello," Nia began in English, her voice tight. I was given this number by a man on the subway, with his son." There was a pause. "One moment." She waited, the sound of her own breathing loud in her small apartment. Then a new voice came on the line, the same low baritone from the train. "You called." "You told me to," she replied, a sliver of defiance in her tone she hadn't intended. Another pause. She could almost hear the calculations happening on the other end. "My son, Jae-won, he has not been calm since his mother passed 6 months ago. He does not sleep. He fights every nanny, every caregiver. But he was calm with you." A statement of fact. "You sang to him, an old song." "It was a song my mother taught me," Nia said quietly. "I will pay you 200 million won a year to be his caregiver," he stated. "You will live in my home, all expenses covered. Your duties are to him, and only to him, to keep him calm, to ensure his well-being." Nia did the math in her head, her mind reeling. 200 million won. It was nearly $170,000. It was the 80,000 for Nana, with enough left over to ensure her care for the foreseeable future. It was a lifeline. It was a gilded cage. "Why?" she asked, the word a whisper. "Because for 5 minutes on a crowded train, my son was not in pain. That is a service for which I am willing to pay." There was no emotion in his voice, but the words themselves held a universe of grief and desperation. "A car will be waiting for you at 7 o'clock tomorrow morning. I will send the address. Be ready." The line went dead. The address led to a monolithic tower in Samseong-dong, a fortress of glass and steel that scraped the sky. The penthouse was a world of cold marble, dark wood, and vast panes of glass that looked down on Seoul like a god. The silence was absolute, punctuated only by the distant hum of the city below. The man, Kang Min-jun, met her at the door. In his home, out of the suit, he seemed even more imposing. He wore simple black trousers and a gray cashmere sweater, but the aura of authority clung to him like a second skin. He led her through the sprawling space to a room that was clearly a nursery, though it had the sterile feel of a museum exhibit. Jae-won was there, sitting on the floor, listlessly pushing a wooden block. When he saw Nia, his face, which had been pinched and unhappy, cleared. He looked at her, a glimmer of recognition in his dark eyes. "His schedule is on the tablet," Min-jun said, gesturing to a device on a nearby counter. "His meals are prepared by the household chef. Your room is down the hall. My office is off limits. Do not speak to my business associates. Your focus is Jae-won." The first week was a quiet truce. Nia focused entirely on the little boy, slowly breaking through his shell of grief. She sang to him, not just the lullaby from the train, but dozens of others her mother had taught her. She played games on the floor, built towers of blocks, and read him stories in both English and Korean. For the first time in months, the penthouse was filled with the sound of a child's laughter. Min-jun was a ghost. He would appear and disappear at odd hours, a silent, watchful presence at the edge of their small world. He never commented on her work, but she would sometimes find him standing in the doorway, his cold eyes fixed on his laughing son, a look of profound, aching loss on his face. The illusion of peaceful domesticity shattered in the second week. Min-jun was holding a meeting in the main living area. Nia was trying to lead Jae-won past the group of severe-looking men in suits, heading for the terrace. "Well, well, what do we have here?" a voice boomed, dripping with condescension. Nia looked up. The man speaking was older than Min-jun, with a fleshy face and small, porcine eyes. He was loud, his suit ostentatious, his gestures theatrical. He was holding court, and Min-jun, seated in a high-backed chair, was letting him. "This must be the new help," the man continued, looking Nia up and down with a dismissive sneer. He turned to his associate and said in rapid colloquial Korean, "Can you believe it? Min-jun finally found a nanny who'll stick. I suppose it's hard to be picky. But this one, a Jeomune, a dark-skinned thing, in this house. His father would never have allowed it." Nia froze, her hand tightening on Jae-won's small one. She kept her face a perfect neutral mask. Her heart was a cold stone in her chest. She understood every word, every slur. She had been raised in the bilingual world of diplomacy. Her Korean was as natural to her as English. She knew the nuances, the slang, the casual cruelty of the word Jeomeon, blackie. Min-jun's face remained impassive, but his eyes, fixed on the man, seemed to grow colder, harder. The man, Director Choi, seemed to relish the attention. He wanted a cup of tea from the table near where Nia stood. Instead of asking, he snapped his fingers. "You, girl, fetch," he commanded in heavily accented, insulting English. Nia moved with deliberate, controlled grace. She would not give him the satisfaction of a reaction. Survival was her mantra. $80,000. She poured the tea, her hands steady. As she turned to hand it to him, he gestured expansively while telling a story, accidentally knocking her arm. Hot tea sloshed over the rim, scalding her hand. She flinched, pulling her hand back with a sharp intake of breath, but made no other sound. A red welt was already rising on her dark skin. "Aigu, clumsy," Choi said in Korean, a smirk playing on his lips. His companions chuckled. It was a performance of dominance, a way to show his power in Min-jun's own home, by humiliating someone under his protection. Nia said nothing. She set the cup down, bowed her head slightly in a gesture of deference she loathed, and took Jae-won's hand. "It is time for his nap," she said in quiet, deferential English. She walked away, feeling the weight of their eyes on her back. Most of all, she felt the weight of Min-jun's silence. He had watched it all. He had done nothing. In that moment, the gilded cage felt very much like a trap. The incident with Director Choi hung in the air for days, an unspoken poison. Min-jun was more distant than ever, his silence heavier, more dangerous. Nia focused on her work, on Jae-won, her burned hand a constant throbbing reminder of her precarious position. She was invisible, a piece of furniture, until someone decided to use her for target practice. The breaking point came during a tense, high-stakes negotiation. Director Choi was attempting to solidify an alliance with a notoriously proud and difficult crime family from Busan, the Hyundai faction. The meeting was taking place in the penthouse, the air thick with the smell of expensive whiskey and unspoken threats. Nia was in the adjoining room with Jae-won, trying to keep him quiet, but the raised voices were making him anxious. Choi was failing. His verbose, blustering style, effective in the boardrooms of Seoul, was falling flat with these hard-bitten men from the coast. His Seoul dialect was too polished, his threats too generic. He was losing them. Frustration made him volatile. He caught sight of Nia hovering in the doorway, waiting for a chance to remove Jae-won from the toxic atmosphere. His failure needed a scapegoat. "Get out!" he roared at her in furious Korean, his face flushed. "Can't you see we are conducting business? Your presence here is a distraction. Take the child and go. This is no place for your kind." Jae-won started to cry, startled by the outburst. The men from Busan exchanged weary, unimpressed glances. Choi's lack of control was an embarrassment. Nia stood perfectly still. The world seemed to slow down. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, a lifetime of swallowing insults, of making herself smaller, of choosing survival over dignity, came to a screeching halt. She thought of her grandmother, fighting for her life with a quiet strength Nia had failed to emulate. She thought of the burn on her hand. She thought of the casual cruelty in this man's eyes. Enough. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't move. She simply let the mask of the deferential nanny fall away. Her shoulders, which had been perpetually curved in a posture of service, straightened. She lifted her chin, and she met Director Choi's furious gaze with an unnerving calm. Then she turned her head slightly and addressed the lead delegate from Busan. Her voice, when it came, was unrecognizable. The quiet, careful English was gone. The deferential tone was gone. In its place was a voice laced with steel, speaking in a perfect, flawless Busan Saturi, the thick, rolling dialect of the southern coast. It was the dialect of her mother, a sound as familiar to her as her own heartbeat. "Director Choi," she began, her tone dangerously mild. The Busan men, who had been slouched in their chairs, sat bolt upright, their eyes widened. "Forgive my interruption, but if you are trying to invoke the loyalty of the Hyundai faction, you should know they don't respond to threats about shipping lanes. They value family." Silence. It was absolute. It was the silence of a bomb being disarmed, or perhaps of one about to detonate. Choi's jaw hung open. The color drained from his face, leaving it a pasty, mottled gray. He looked at her as if she had sprouted a second head. Nia's eyes flickered to the lead delegate. "Perhaps you should have mentioned that your own mother was from Gijong," she continued in the dialect, the words a quiet indictment of Choi's ignorance. "Or offered your condolences for the passing of Elder Park's wife last month. Respect is not a commodity to be traded for port access. It is the foundation upon which everything is built." From the corner of the room, where he had been observing the entire disaster, Kang Min-jun did not move a muscle, but something in his eyes, a dangerous, predatory light, flickered to life. He was watching a chess piece he'd thought was a pawn suddenly move like a queen. Nia took a small step forward, her presence commanding the room. She looked back at Choi, whose face was a mask of shattered disbelief. "He's offering you 15% of the new port contract," she said to the Busan men, her voice dropping into a conspiratorial tone. "A pittance. Chairman Kang's original offer, before he retired, was 25%, not as a business deal, as a matter of respect between old families." The lead Busan delegate looked from Nia's calm, authoritative face to Choi's sputtering one, and then to the silent, watchful Kang Min-jun. He saw the truth. He saw the power shift. He gave a slow, deliberate nod, not to Choi, but to Min-jun. The deal was done. Choi had been rendered irrelevant by the foreign nanny he had tried to humiliate. "Jae-won," Nia said, her voice softening as she switched back to the gentle tone she used only for him. "Let's go read a story." She took the little boy's hand and led him from the room, leaving a crater of silence in her wake. Later that night, she was in the nursery, rocking a sleeping Jae-won in her arms. The door opened silently. It was Min-jun. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, watching her. The air between them was charged with unspoken questions. "The Busan dialect," he finally said. It wasn't a question. It was a demand for information. "Where?" Nia carefully placed Jae-won in his crib, pulling a light blanket over him. She turned to face her employer. The dynamic between them had irrevocably changed. She was no longer just the help. My mother was from Busan, she said, her voice even. My father was an American diplomat. I grew up in Seoul, in the embassy compounds. I spent my summers with my grandparents by the sea. She offered the facts of her life like carefully chosen chess pieces. A diplomat's daughter, he murmured, his eyes searching her face. Serving as a nanny. My father was caught in a political scandal. He was a scapegoat. The career he built for 30 years vanished overnight. Doors that were once open to me were slammed shut. In America, I'm not American enough. Here, I'm not Korean enough. A care aide is a job that requires no connections. And it paid the bills, until it didn't. Min-jun absorbed this, his expression unreadable. Director Choi will not forgive this humiliation, he stated, his voice flat. He is a vain, proud man. You exposed him as a fool in front of his rivals. You are no longer safe. I am aware of that, Naya said. I will provide security. You will not leave this building without my men. Nia shook her head, a small, firm gesture. He won't come at me with a knife in an alley, Mr. Kang. Men like Choi don't work that way. He'll be subtle. He'll frame me for theft. He'll plant drugs in my room. He'll find my grandmother and create a problem with her visa or her medical care. Your bodyguards can't protect me from that. For the first time since she'd met him, Min-jun looked at her with something approaching respect. He saw that she understood the rules of his world better than he had anticipated. Protection isn't enough, Nia continued, her voice dropping, gaining an intensity that matched his own. He's a liability to you, he's incompetent, and his greed makes him predictable. The only way for me to be safe, for your son to be safe, is to remove him. The air crackled. She had just proposed a coup. Min-jun was silent for a long time. He walked over to the vast window, looking down at the glittering sprawl of the city he commanded. Remove him, he repeated softly. He has been with my family's organization for 30 years. His roots run deep. And they are rotten? Nia countered. He's stealing from you. I can feel it. A man that arrogant, that desperate to prove himself, always overplays his hand. Min-jun turned from the window. He walked toward her until he was standing only a few feet away. The sheer force of his presence was overwhelming, but Naya held her ground, meeting his gaze without flinching. You believe you can prove this? He asked. I believe that, with the right resources, I can find the proof you need to cut out the rot, she replied. He studied her, his analyst's mind piecing together the woman in front of him. The diplomat's daughter with the Busan dialect, the caregiver with the nerves of steel, the strategist who saw the game 3 moves ahead. My son's previous nannies were afraid of me, he said, a strange, almost personal admission. You are not. I have my own fears, Mr. Kang, Nia said, her voice softening for the first time. They just have nothing to do with you. He understood, her grandmother. Your grandmother's treatment at Asan Medical Center, he stated. It will be taken care of. Consider it a retainer for your consulting services. He didn't frame it as a gift. It was a transaction, a contract. You will continue to be Jae-won's caregiver. It is the perfect cover. No one will suspect. But you will also have access to my resources, my network, my infrastructure. Find me the proof I need, miss. What is your family name? Monroe, she said. Nia Monroe. Find me the proof, Miss Monroe, Kang Min-jun said, his voice a low, dangerous promise. And I will give you a platform from which to destroy him. The alliance was forged, not in friendship, but in mutual interest in a shared enemy. It was a war, and Nia, the invisible nanny, had just been handed command of the 1st Battalion. The penthouse, once a place of quiet servitude, became Nia's command center. By day, she was the devoted nanny, her world revolving around Jae-won's naps, meals, and playtime. They were her shield, her cover, her anchor of humanity in the cold, dangerous world she was navigating. By night, after the boy was asleep and the household was quiet, she became an analyst, a hunter. Min-jun gave her a tablet, identical to the one for Jae-won's schedule. But this one was a ghost, a military-grade encrypted device that was a direct line to his organization's entire digital infrastructure. Financial records, personnel files, surveillance logs. A universe of data was at her fingertips. Choi is too smart to leave a simple paper trail in the main ledgers, Nia told Min-jun one night, as they stood before the vast window overlooking the city. Men like him build firewalls of plausible deniability. But his ego is his weakness. He likes beautiful things: art, cars, women. Luxury is where men like him hide their money. She began her search there, in the corporate expenses for subsidiary companies, restaurants, luxury boutiques, and one particularly high-end art gallery in Cheongdam-dong that was a known passion project of director Choi. The gallery, Gallery Sila, was hemorrhaging money on paper, writing off millions in acquisitions of modern art that never seemed to appreciate in value. It was a tax write-off, a rich man's hobby, too perfect. He's using it to wash money, Nia stated, but the official books will be clean. The real transactions will be in a second ledger, a physical one most likely, in his office at the gallery. I can have my men retrieve it, Min-jun offered, his default solution. Brute force. No, Nia countered immediately. A break-in will tip him off, he'll destroy the evidence and go to ground. I have to get it myself. He can't suspect a thing. This was the moment for her first solo operation. She spent 2 days researching the gallery, its staff, and its current exhibits. She discovered the gallery manager was a sycophant, desperate to be seen as a true art connoisseur. Nia also fabricated an identity, an independently wealthy art buyer from a new money family in America, looking to establish a collection. She used one of Min-jun's untraceable credit cards to buy an expensive dress and shoes. The transformation was startling. The quiet nanny disappeared, replaced by a confident, sophisticated woman who belonged in the world of high-priced art. She walked into Gallery Silla alone. The air smelled of money and pretense. The gallery manager, a man named Mr. Kim, initially looked down his nose at her until Nia started speaking. She didn't just talk about the art, she dissected it, using the critical language she'd learned from years of trailing her diplomat father through museums and cultural events around the world. She spoke of an obscure artist, one she knew the gallery had no connection to, and praised Mr. Kim's foresight in recognizing his emerging genius. The manager, flattered and eager to impress this knowledgeable new client, puffed up with pride. Ah yes, a brilliant talent. We have some of his early sketches in the back office, not yet prepared for exhibit, he lied smoothly. I would be fascinated to see them, Nia said, her voice betraying nothing but enthusiasm. It was the opening she needed. He led her into the cramped, cluttered back office. While he rummaged through a flat file, pretending to search for the non-existent sketches, Nia's eyes scanned the room. And there it was. On a shelf behind his desk, a simple black leather-bound ledger. It didn't match the pristine digital records she knew he kept. Oh, is that a Gorioceladon? Nia exclaimed, pointing to a vase on another shelf, deliberately turning the manager's back to the desk. The glaze is magnificent. It reminds me of a piece I saw at the Met. As he moved to preen over the vase, Nia's movements were swift and silent. She took out her phone, which Min-jun had equipped with a silent, high-resolution camera. Snap, snap, snap. She photographed a dozen pages of the ledger, columns of names, dates, and figures that meant nothing on their own, but she knew they were the key. A beautiful piece, she said, turning back to him, her phone already tucked away. Unfortunately, not quite what I'm looking for today. She made her excuses and left, leaving the manager confused but unsuspecting. Back in the penthouse, she and Min-jun analyzed the photos. The names were coded, the transactions opaque, but one name appeared repeatedly next to astronomical figures. The Phoenix. That's not one of our accounts, Min-jun said, his voice dangerously low. He typed the name into his own system. Nothing. He made a call, speaking in clipped, rapid Korean. After a few minutes, he hung up, his face grim. The Phoenix is the code name for the head of the Sun Yi-on triad in Makoo, a rival, a blood enemy of my father. The picture suddenly became terrifyingly clear. Choi isn't just skimming, Nia whispered, the pieces clicking into place. He's selling you out. He's laundering their money, giving them a foothold in your territory, likely in exchange for their help in a takeover. He's planning to kill you and seize the entire organization. The betrayal was deeper and more absolute than either of them had imagined. This wasn't just about greed, it was treason. As if on cue, Nia's personal phone buzzed. It was a text from the private nurse she had hired for her grandmother. A man was here. He asked for Mrs. Wilson by name, said he was an old friend. He left this. Attached was a photo, a single perfect white orchid lying on the bedside table. Except its stem was snapped, the blossom drooping and dead. Ice flooded Nia's veins. It was a message from Choi. I know where she is. I can touch her whenever I want. I'll move her, Minjun said immediately, his voice a low growl of fury. To a private facility. My men will surround the building. No. The word was sharp, instinctive. Nia's mind was racing, her fear a cold, clear engine for strategy. That's what he wants. He wants you to react, to show your hand, to confirm that she is my weakness. If you move her, you escalate. He'll see it as a declaration of war, and he might act rashly. He might just hurt her to prove he can. Then what do you propose? Minjun demanded, his protective instincts warring with her cold logic. We do nothing? We do something better, Nia said, her voice firm. She was pacing now, the diplomat's daughter, the strategist, taking full command. We hide in plain sight. I have a friend, my father's former colleague from the NIS. He runs a private security firm now. We hire one of his best men, someone who can pass as a hospital orderly. He'll be in her room, 24/7. Choi's surveillance will see a normal hospital routine. They won't see the guard. We give him the illusion of control while we take it away from him. Minjun stared at her, his anger slowly receding, replaced by a dawning, grudging admiration. Her plan was more subtle, more sophisticated than his own. It was the move of an intelligence operative, not a crime boss. He was a hammer, and every problem was a nail. She was a scalpel. He gave a single sharp nod. Make the call. The final piece of the escalation came a week later. Minjun was scheduled to visit a construction site for a new hotel his company was financing, a massive project Choi was overseeing. Nia insisted on accompanying him, under the guise of assessing the site's ground floor for a potential daycare for employees' children. A perfect cover. The site was a chaotic symphony of noise and motion. As Minjun spoke with the foreman, Nia's senses were on high alert. Something felt wrong. The usual rhythmic chaos was off-key. She noticed the crane operator high above, a man she didn't recognize. He wasn't looking at the load of steel I-beams dangling from his crane. He was looking at his watch, his face pale and sweating despite the cool air. Then she scanned the ground. The usual ground crew, the men who were supposed to guide the load, were nowhere in sight. They were all clustered near the site entrance, an unusual break, an anomaly, a detail out of place, the core of her father's training. The crane whirred, swinging the massive load directly over the spot where she and Minjun were standing. The foreman was pointing at a set of blueprints. Minjun was looking at them, his back to the danger. The crane operator looked at his watch one last time and reached for a lever. There was no time to explain. Minjun, get down! Nia screamed. She didn't wait for him to react. She launched herself at him, a blur of motion, wrapping her arms around his waist and using all her weight to tackle him backward. They crashed to the ground behind a large stack of concrete barriers, the impact knocking the wind out of her. A split second later, the air split with a terrifying shriek of metal, followed by a ground-shaking boom. The steel I-beams, tons of them, crashed onto the exact spot where they had been standing, sending up a shower of dust and debris. The silence that followed was deafening. Nia lay on top of Minjun, her heart pounding against his chest. His arms were wrapped around her, a reflexive, protective gesture. He slowly rolled them over, shielding her with his body as dust rained down. He looked down at her, his eyes wide with a mixture of shock and something else she couldn't name. His breath was ragged. She had saved his life, not with a gun, not with force, but with observation, with a skill he did not possess. The balance of power, of debt, had shifted once again. She wasn't just his analyst. She wasn't just his nanny. She was his shield. And he knew, with chilling certainty, that Director Choi had just made his final mistake. He had tried to kill the chairman. There was no coming back from that. This ends now. Minjun's voice was deadly quiet, the sound of a storm gathering on a placid horizon. They were back in the penthouse, the dust of the construction site still clinging to their clothes. Jae-won was safe with a trusted housekeeper, asleep, oblivious to the fact that his father had just escaped death. He tried to kill you, Nia said, stating the obvious. He won't stop until one of you is dead. He will not get another chance, Minjun replied. His rage was a cold, controlled thing, all the more terrifying for its lack of heat. I will tear down his entire world. I will salt the earth where his house stood. A public execution, Nia murmured, understanding immediately. You can't just make him disappear. You have to make an example of him, to show your organization and your enemies what happens to traitors. The annual Foundation Gala is in 3 days, Min-jun said. It is our largest public event. All our business partners, our political allies, everyone will be there. It will be the stage. Good, Nia said, her mind already working, assembling the pieces. But you can't be the one to swing the axe, not directly. It has to be clean. It has to be undeniable. The evidence has to speak for itself, but it can't be a data dump on a screen. That's weak. It has to be personal. It has to be visceral. This was her plan. She had earned the right to design the trap. Min-jun listened, his head tilted. No longer her employer, but her co-conspirator. She laid it out, step by step. The timing, the props, the words. It was a strategy born of diplomatic maneuvering and a deep understanding of human weakness, tailored for a world of brutal consequence. For the next 3 days, the penthouse was a silent whirlwind of preparation. Nia barely slept. She coordinated with Min-jun's most trusted lieutenant, a grim-faced man named Mr. Park, who now looked at her with a new, profound respect. They retrieved the final piece of evidence she needed, not through force, but through a clever bit of financial blackmail against the gallery manager, Mr. Kim. He folded instantly, providing the location of a stolen national treasure Choi had acquired as a show of power. On the night of the gala, the grand ballroom of the Shilla Hotel was a galaxy of wealth and power. Politicians, CEOs, and the shadowy figures who truly ran the city mingled under crystal chandeliers, their laughter tinkling like ice in whiskey glasses. Director Choi was in his element, holding court at a prominent table, his arrogance fully restored. He believed he had won. He believed Min-jun was either dead or too foolish to understand what had happened. Then the doors to the ballroom opened, and a hush fell over the room. Kang Min-jun entered. At his side was not a date, not a bodyguard, but Nia. The transformation was absolute. The nanny's simple clothes were gone. In their place, she wore a custom-made hanbok, the traditional Korean dress of the deepest indigo silk, embroidered with silver thread that caught the light. Her hair was swept up in an elegant chignon, held in place by a single, ornate jade pin. She wore no jewelry except for the pin. She needed none. Her posture, her calm, her commanding presence were her adornments. She was not the help. She was not a guest. She was power. Choi saw her. The whiskey glass in his hand trembled, sloshing amber liquid onto the white tablecloth. His face, flushed with victory, went slack with disbelief and a sudden, sickening dread. He was looking at a ghost, and the ghost was walking toward him. Min-jun led her through the silent, staring crowd, the sea of power parting before them. He stopped at the center of the room, but Nia continued walking until she reached Director Choi's table. The men from Busan were there, the same men who had witnessed her first act of defiance. They watched, their faces grimly expectant. "Good evening, Director Choi." Nia's voice was clear and calm, carrying effortlessly through the cavernous, silent room. She spoke in formal, precise Korean. "I see you are enjoying the festivities. I trust the business with our friends from Macau is proceeding well?" Choi flinched as if struck. I don't know what you're talking about," he stammered, his eyes darting around for support, but finding only cold, curious stares. "Of course you do," Nia said, her tone still pleasant. "You have such a passion for acquiring rare and beautiful things. A true connoisseur." Mr. Park stepped forward, holding a velvet-wrapped object. He placed it gently on the table in front of Choi. Nia unwrapped it, revealing a small, exquisite Goryeo Celadon vase, its jade-green glaze glowing under the chandeliers. This, for example, a magnificent piece, a national treasure, in fact. A collective gasp went through the room. "It was reported stolen from the National Museum 5 years ago," Nia continued, her voice as smooth as the vase's glaze. "Imagine our surprise when it was recovered yesterday from the private collection of Mr. Wei of the Sun Yi-on Triad, the Phoenix." She let the name hang in the air. Choi's face was ashen. "Mr. Wei was so grateful for our assistance in a recent financial matter that he felt compelled to offer a gift. He was also kind enough to provide the ledgers detailing who sold him this piece, and for whom he has been laundering money inside this very organization for the last 2 years. A nest egg, perhaps, for a new business venture. She had used her knowledge, her skill for forensics, cultural and financial, to corner him. The trap was sprung. The evidence was irrefutable, the delivery a masterpiece of public humiliation. Choi's composure finally shattered. He scrambled to his feet, his chair clattering to the floor. He turned to Min Jun, his face a pathetic mask of terror. "Min Jun-si, Chairman, please. I have served your family for 30 years. Your father, he trusted me." Min Jun, who had remained silent, took a single step forward. His face was a carving of ice. "My father trusted the man you were, not the snake you became," he said, his voice a low growl that sent a shudder through the room. "You threatened her family," he gestured to Nia. "You targeted my son's caregiver, and you tried to take my life. There is no forgiveness for that." Choi turned back to Nia, his eyes wild with desperation. Who are you?" Nia leaned in, her voice a whisper meant only for him. "You saw a black woman in a nanny's uniform. You saw someone invisible." She straightened up, her voice ringing out for all to hear, a final, devastating mic drop. "Just a waitress with good ears." She paused, letting the echo of her first reveal in the penthouse land with the force of a physical blow. "The authorities have already been given an anonymous tip regarding the vase. They will be here shortly to collect it, and you. They have not, however, been informed about the triad connection." She looked at Min Jun. "Chairman Kong will decide how our family handles its traitors." The meaning was clear. The police would take him for the theft. The organization would deal with the treason. His life was over. Min Jun gave a subtle nod. Two of his men, who had been standing impassively by the walls, moved forward and took Choi by the arms. He didn't struggle. He was a broken man. As they led him away, his eyes met Nia's one last time. They held not hatred, but a profound, uncomprehending shock. The shock of a predator outmaneuvered by what he had considered prey. 6 months later, the boardroom was on the 78th floor of a skyscraper in Uido, the financial heart of Seoul. The view was breathtaking, a panoramic sweep of the Han River and the bustling city. But Nia wasn't looking at the view. She was at the head of a long, polished table, across from a delegation of stern-faced investors from Singapore. "While a 20% stake is generous," she said in crisp, unaccented English, "it doesn't reflect the proprietary nature of the technology we're bringing to the table. Our new graphene battery patent is a generational leap. We believe a 12% stake, in exchange for exclusive distribution rights in the ASEAN region, is a more equitable valuation." She was no longer in a hanbok or a nanny's uniform. She wore a tailored suit of charcoal gray, her hair cut in a short, stylish crop that framed her intelligent eyes. She was the chief strategy officer for Min Jun's new, legitimate global enterprise, K Genesis Innovations. It was his first major step out of the shadows, and she was the architect. At the far end of the table, Min Jun sat, a silent, watchful presence. He said nothing, but his confidence in her was absolute. He had given her the platform, and she had built an empire on it. Later that week, she drove herself, not in a chauffeured black sedan, but in her own modest Hyundai, to a beautiful, sun-drenched private garden attached to the hospital. Her grandmother was there, sitting in a comfortable chair, a canvas on an easel before her. She was painting, her hands steady, her face filled with color and life. Her cancer was in remission, the $80,000 mountain was a distant memory, a foothill she had conquered and left far behind. "That blue is beautiful, Nana," Nia said, kissing her grandmother's cheek. "It's the color of the sky the day you were born," Nana replied, her eyes twinkling. "Full of possibilities." That evening, back in the penthouse, Nia was on the floor of a new sunlit playroom she had designed, helping Jae-won put the finishing touches on a massive Lego castle. The room was filled with warmth, color, and a little boy's happy chatter. The sterile fortress had become a home. The door opened and Min Jun came in. He was holding 2 cups. He handed one to her. It was her favorite jasmine tea. He didn't speak, just sat on the floor near her, watching his son proudly show Nia the castle's highest tower. For a moment, they were just 2 parents watching their child. The violence, the fear, the blood, it all seemed a world away. Jae-won, finished with his masterpiece, ran over and hugged Nia's leg, burying his face in her side. She stroked his hair, her heart filled with a fierce, protective love. Minjun watched the easy affection between them. A small, almost imperceptible smile touched his lips, a rare expression that softened the hard lines of his face. "My father," he said, his voice quiet, "used to say that a person's worth is not found in their station, but in their character. It took you to remind me of that." Nia looked at him, at this dangerous, complicated man who had become her partner, her protector, her something more. She had not been rescued, she had been recognized. And in that recognition, she had found the freedom to become the person she was always meant to be. She had found her place, not in a country or a job title, but here, in this small circle of quiet understanding, with a little boy's arms around her leg and a silent king at her side. She was home. When the world sees only a uniform, how do you show them the person inside? What would you have done?